Bill of lading, is it a federal document?
That is a great question. I'm not sure.
I've been taught that 15 years ago or 17 years ago by a very smart gentleman. He told me once this: you're as good as your last load is. But they don't understand, drivers don't understand that the seal put on the shipper actually protects them.
It's for their protection.
For their own protection. So they say, hey, you know what? It's been sealed. You used a very, very dangerous word now, margins. And I'm gonna attack you on that.
Okay.
Because everybody is waiting on that. You guys are making a lot of money. But you guys are the biggest challenge and the biggest problem of everything that happened. Добрый день, здравствуйте, ребята. Добро пожаловать на канал Cold Crew, канал, на котором мы обсуждаем бизнес, мы обсуждаем иммиграцию чуть-чуть, канал, где мы приглашаем интересных, хороших гостей. Пожалуйста, не забываем подписываться, пожалуйста, ставим лайки, это очень-очень важно. Я вот со славным партнером своему говорил, что на днях столкнулся с такой проблемой, хотел позвать в гости очень интересного, серьезного бизнесмена, один из самых влиятельных в траковой индустрии бизнесменов в городе Чикаго, который владеет очень многим. И я когда к нему обратился то есть прийти к нам на подкаст, мне красиво отказали, потому что канал слишком маленький, поэтому обращаюсь к вам за помощью. Пожалуйста, если вы смотрите этот канал, если вам это нравится, если вам это интересно, пожалуйста, ставим лайк. Это же очень-очень просто. И не забываем подписываться. Тем самым вы нам поможете позвать, то есть вырасти этот канал на какие-то хорошие уровни, дабы помочь нам позвать более успешных, интересных людей. Сегодня я рад приветствовать хорошего своего товарища, друга. Его зовут Джо. Он владелец брокерской компании под названием BLACKJACK EXPRESS. Он в бизнесе порядка 30 лет. Сейчас мы у него это все спросим. Очень интересный человек, я с ним долго знаком. Хочу сказать, что мы с этой компанией делаем очень много бизнеса, друг другу помогаем. И он согласился прийти к нам на подкаст чисто из нашей дружбы, поделиться информацией, поделиться датами с вами. И будет интересно сегодня поговорить про брокерский мир, про то, как брокера делают бизнес, и попытаемся задать такие какие-то интересные вопросы, чтобы он раскрыл какие-то цифры, кто как зарабатывает, и, может быть, поговорим о мифе, что брокера разрушили этот бизнес. Поэтому я вам представляю нашего гостя. Опять же, его зовут Джо, но есть одно но. Мы этот подкаст проведем на английском языке, поэтому мы поставим перевод на русский. Мы еще не знаем, как это сделать. То есть, либо это будет субтитры, либо это будет voice-over. Мы еще как бы обсуждаем это. Поэтому весь этот подкаст будет на английском языке. Так что не обижайтесь, наверное, на наличие знания этого языка. Mr. Joe, I'm gonna be talking in English right now for everybody. First of all, I wanted to say big thank you for accepting my invitation to come here. You have a lot of experience in this business, in trucking business, in freight in general. We do a lot of business together. We're good friends. We speak a lot, and the fact that you accepted to be here, to come here as a guest, and to be willing to actually speak about what's happening today and what a brokerage company looks like is a big fact. The purpose of this podcast today is going to be purely educational. We're going to try to show people that I mean trucking companies, we can somehow coexist with brokerages, right? We'll try to show people that brokers, or at least not all the brokers, they're not our enemies. Of course, there's bad apples out there, unfortunately. So thank you very much for coming.
Victor, thanks for the invitation. Glad to be here. Appreciate your friendship and the opportunity to get together and have a conversation today.
Very nice. Well, I know you said this is the first time you've been at a podcast, so I'll try to navigate you through the process and to make it as easy as it could. So please feel free, be natural. Our subscribers, our viewers feel that, so they want us to be natural and to talk and to name things as they are. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So let me please ask you with the first question to tell us a little bit about yourself, about your experience, about your career. How'd you end up in this hole? And yes, please.
So I got into the industry in 1994. I was in pretty much a dead-end job at that time. And I was, somebody asked me to come in and run a trucking company for them. And the opportunity sounded exciting, challenging, interesting. It definitely was better than what I was doing at the time, because I was really, like I said, in a dead-end job. So in 1994, I ran a trucking company for about a year and a half, about a 20 truck owner-operator fleet. And our lanes were basically Midwest to West Coast. And really a year into it, the folks I worked for figured out that I was really probably over my head, because safety is a whole body of knowledge, and I came into it cold without a lot of training. And so I think at that time we were 20, 25 trucks, and there was a need there was a related brokerage company. So there was a need for somebody to handle what for them was the outbound lane, was Midwest to West Coast. And so it was going to be a win-win to move me into that slot, because the folks I worked for felt that I had a gift of gab with the drivers. I could schmooze drivers, had a gift of gab. I learned a lot in that year, but DOT compliance, driver qualification files, drug testing, all of that is a certain body of knowledge which I really didn't possess.
Right.
And so they had an opportunity to hire somebody from what was then a defunct trucking company that had experience managing a fleet that was much larger than our fleet. So 1994, for about a year, I was doing safety for an owner-operator fleet. Then I got into the brokerage business.
I'm sorry. Is this the fleet that I know, that we both know now? Your cousin's one, or there was a different one?
Well, I think it's a different fleet today. But
Okay.
but I worked for
Gotcha.
my cousin.
Gotcha.
I think that fleet's not around anymore. But I was from 94 till for about a year and a half, I was running this trucking company. Then I moved into brokerage. By 1997, I went on my own to become an agent for another company. So along the way, I had acquired a couple trucks. So then I was an owner-operator leased on to this trucking company that I was running. So I knew the business from the trucking side, having run the safety of this trucking company. Then I bought a couple trucks. So then I was an owner-operator leased on. I worked inside a brokerage, and then I moved and ultimately into brokerage. So all told, my career at this company was about 3 years. From 94 to 97, I went on my own in 97 as a freight agent for another company. I owned a couple of trucks at that time.
Are they still in business?
They're not still in business.
Okay.
So that was a company out of Texas.
I hope that wasn't because of you, right?
Not because of me. No. So I don't think they're around anymore. But I was with another company for, a year or two. And then by 1997, I got my own credentials. By 1997, I became an agent for another company. And I was with them for basically a couple of years. So the time frame was that I was with my first company for about 3 years.
Yes.
And I was an agent for about 2 years. And then after that, by 1999, I got a line of credit from a bank. I got my own trucking authority, brokerage authority, and I was really on my own as a standalone company by 1999.
Can I stop you right there? So you had dual authority, right? You had a brokerage and a trucking authority. So
Correct.
dual authorities, right?
Correct.
You still have dual authorities up to this date, correct?
We do.
Yes. Now, this is a very important moment now that I'm going to ask you why you chose the path of brokerage and not the path of trucking. This is the moment that, kind of defines people's successes. We as immigrants, we somehow, when we enter this business, we go trucking route. Now, you took the brokerage route. Please explain why, because you knew what a trucking company is. You ran one, you had trucks, and you opened brokerage. Why did you decide to focus more on the brokerage side of things rather than trucking? That's very, very important.
That was really, really my strength was, and what I really learned, and I worked in a brokerage, so it really was what I knew and what my strength was. By 1996, by 2006, we decided not to have trucks anymore. So we don't have trucks anymore, and BLACKJACK today is only a brokerage.
Does that mean that brokerage actually makes more money?
No, not necessarily.
Okay, but then there's a reason why you did that. Is it just purely because of the knowledge, or is it because of the liabilities, the risks? Why is that? You got rid of all the trucks by 2007. There's got to be a reason.
Yeah,
for
the
that.
reason was it was risk. It was risk. It was risk mitigation. The trucking business is very risky, because, as you know, because every truck that's out on the road with your name on the door of it it's liability. It's a
Correct.
tremendous amount of liability.
Huge.
Interestingly, gross profit margins for truckers and brokers are pretty similar,
Right.
but the liabilities are different. So whereas truckers have the biggest liability is catastrophic highway accident risk.
God forbid, yes.
God forbid. That's risk number one. On the brokerage side, there's financial risks too, but it's credit risk. So risks of a trucking company are credit risk of claims with carriers that may or may not ultimately be covered by insurance, risk of an adverse carrier selection. So if we're not careful as a broker and we onboard an unfit carrier, that could give us potentially a lot of risk.
Since you started, since you actually entered this area of talking about risks, let's try to discuss about one scenario. Help me understand, because this is going to be new for me as well and for everybody watching us. So, God forbid, HYZ Logistics, right? You brokered out a load to HYZ Logistics, which is a carrier which owns trucks. They put one of their trucks on a load brokered out by, let's say, BLACKJACK or whatever, a brokerage firm. Now, they got loaded, got on the road. They got loaded in the state of Wisconsin, going to California. In Wyoming or in Nebraska, God forbid, an accident happens, right? They hit a car, somebody dies, fatality. Again, God forbid, but those things happen, unfortunately. Now, HYZ Logistics has liability insurance. They're supposed to have liability insurance, right? They have physical insurance, non-liability insurance, cargo insurance, and liability insurance. Now, they are limited. I think the minimum is $750, but everybody has $1 million liability policy. So the family of the deceased party asks for $3 million, right? So the insurance of the trucking company of HYZ will pay out $1 million, and then there's $2 million on the carrier.
Yep.
Right? And the carrier is a very small carrier. They will go bankrupt in 5 minutes. We all know how it's done. Now, the question, will they go, in this particular scenario, will they go after the broker?
They can. They don't always, but they can.
Why would they? Because explain us why a broker that sits in the office brokers out a load. Why do you guys have to be liable for somebody else's mistake, maybe.
Right. Well, the law is that brokers are not responsible for the actions of the motor carrier. The case law and also the agreements that we use protect us. But we live in a very litigious society. And even if the broker is not liable, once plaintiffs' attorneys get in the mix, they start going after everybody in the supply chain.
Right.
They could go after the broker, they could go also after the shipper, the consignee. And so even though the brokers are not liable, there still is the risk of having to defend, which litigation is extremely expensive.
Of course.
And so even if not liable, you still could get dragged into a litigation and have to defend yourself.
Now, do you guys, as a brokerage, just so people understand, you guys have liability insurances?
We don't.
You guys don't have a liability insurance like we do.
Correct.
Like for $1 million, right?
Correct.
So if, God forbid, you get involved in a lawsuit, in a litigation, you have to defend yourself with your own money.
Correct.
There's no insurance that will actually help you.
Correct.
Okay. How often those things happen? Brokers getting involved in those litigations, in those lawsuits?
Well, I think we read about cases from time to time, especially the big ones.
Mm-hmm.
We've been blessed for that not to happen in my career, but you never know when lightning can strike.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Okay. What other risks? So in that situation, you are liable for the product, correct? That sits in that trailer. Is that correct?
Well, the carrier is liable for the cargo.
Correct. And if the carrier cannot pay for it, or the insurance denies it, right? Which a lot of insurances nowadays purely just send cancellation notice, or they deny it, because by the law, liability insurance, and I don't know if everybody knows that, but by the law, liability insurance has to pay the other party, and then they can sue the carrier, the trucking company. But cargo insurance, they're not liable by the law. I mean, they want to pay, they will pay. If they don't, they won't, right? They will find a million excuses not to pay for that claim. So we've established that HYZ Logistics went out of business because of the big lawsuit. Now, who pays for that freight? Not for the freight, I'm sorry.
The cargo.
For the cargo, for the product, yes.
Yeah, so the cargo, the carrier is responsible for the cargo, not the broker. But if the carrier is out of business, customers always look to the broker because they trust the broker to move their freight, and the customers want to do business with reputable companies that are not going to run away when there's a claim. And so, to your point, cargo carriers, what we're seeing of late is they're coming up with so many reasons to not pay a claim, many of which, so we haul a lot of refrigerated freight.
Correct.
So I've got 3 refrigerated claims on my desk right now that are looking good chance that the insurance companies are not going to pay. And the reason...
Can you talk about them?
Yeah, the reason...
For a minute?
Yeah, the reasons is that all 3 of them have in common is, number one, small trucking companies that are being not cooperative with the insurance companies.
Yes, that is one big reason.
Number one, they're not cooperative with document requests. One of the key document requests, especially in an off-temperature produce claim or refrigerated freight claim, is they want to see maintenance records.
Correct.
And there really is no industry standard, but every insurance policy has a different standard for maintenance of the equipment. And so we brokers don't control the maintenance cycles of the equipment of the motor carriers that we hire.
Mm-hmm.
So if we hire a carrier that's not properly maintaining their equipment, so long as there's no claim, well, we never know it, and our load's picked up and delivered on time, and everything is good. But as soon as a claim comes up and the insurance adjusters start peeling back the onion and get to the essence of it, they've got a checklist that they have to hit.
Mm-hmm.
If there's missing documents or missing records or whatever, claim denied. And so then the carrier owes for the cargo claim. So let's say it's an off temperature, equipment failed. The carrier owes even if the insurance company doesn't pay. But getting the carrier to pay, and especially in the current environment where carriers are really struggling, it's really difficult. And then politically speaking, you don't want to run away from your customers in the case of a claim. We brokers, unless we're contractually obligated to pay, are technically not required to pay for the carrier's claim. But the best way to lose a good customer, a big customer, a number one customer is to run away and stiff them on a big claim. So sometimes we do get left holding the bag.
Do you have insurance for those types of claims?
We don't.
You don't have cargo insurance that will get involved in that sort of situation? Not you, Blackjack, but brokers in general.
Sometimes brokers will have contingent cargo insurance, but I've seen, and we have had that, many claims have been denied through contingent cargo. There's always so many loopholes that they generally don't pay.
So at the end of the day, you just end up paying money out of your own pocket.
At the end of the day, you're stiffed.
Now
you end up eating the loss.
Now, one more extremely important thing is when they say you got to pay for the product, right? How do you establish the price of the product? Is it with the lost business, or is it or is it without it, or is it the do you negotiate the price? I know a little bit about your situation. I would like you to tell people if you're able to do that. I don't know your contracts and all that, but still, how much do you? So, for example, there's an X amount of meat, right? And the shipper sold that meat to the receiver for, hypothetically speaking, $100,000. Now the receiver is gonna resell it for $140,000 with a $40,000 profit margin, right? What's gonna be the ultimate bill that will end up on a carrier's desk or yours? Would it be $100,000 or would it be $140,000? That's very important.
That is a great question. So that can vary by customer and by contract. From the customer side, and there's many types of claims, big and small. Sometimes truck is late, there's lost sales, they had to buy against the truck at a higher price, and it's really the Wild West when it comes to claims. But when you get in a big claim situation like the one that you're talking about, it's all in the gray area and it ends up getting negotiated. Customers typically want to be reimbursed. If it's it depends on who the party is that was damaged, because there's many parties to a transaction. You've got a shipper, you've got a receiver, you have a commodity broker oftentimes in the mix. So it depends on who's actually getting damaged and how they're getting damaged. So it's in the gray area. But when you're navigating a claim, the best case scenario is to settle the claim with your customer for cost of goods sold. Meaning?
For $100,000.
Right. So meaning it cost $100,000. Well, let's say the shipper sold the load for $100,000, but let's say the shipper hired the broker or the carrier, let's say, and let's say the shipper had an invoice to his customer for $100,000. Well, let's say it cost him $80,000 to make the goods. So cost of goods sold for the shipper is $80,000.
Correct.
So when you're navigating these matters, and the insurance adjusters are very, privy to this too, because when they're settling a claim, let's say the stars are in the right alignment and an insurance adjuster is going to pay a claim, they will negotiate on behalf of their client or their employer, and that's the insurance company, to try to mitigate. And they'll usually try to settle for cost of goods sold. So oftentimes it's an arm wrestling match.
But the first invoice that will be sent with the lost business. I mean, with the profit already in it.
The profit already in it. And as you're unraveling a claim, you try to unravel it back to cost of goods sold.
So what we're trying to explain here to our viewers and our subscribers and future subscribers, of course, please don't forget to subscribe and like. First invoice that you're gonna get from a claim, it's not always the ultimate invoice and the last invoice. That invoice includes, most of the time, not always, but most of the time, it includes lost business. So we have to negotiate that invoice down to, can we request the official information of how much the cost of goods were officially? Can we request that from the broker or the customer?
Yeah, you definitely can request it. You may, now some customers, there's different levels of professionalism with different customers, because some people, there's some pencil behind the ear customers, and then you're going to be dealing potentially like with publicly traded companies and all kinds of companies in between. But when resolving a claim from the carrier standpoint, you want to request invoices. All the more documentation, the better, because in a claim situation, everybody connected with the claim has rights, and transparency of the information is important, that everybody's dealing on the up and up, and it's from those documents that you negotiate a settlement.
All right. Okay. Good points. I learned something. I hope everybody did also. Now, since we got there and we use terms shipper, customer, transportation brokerage, commodity brokerage, and all, let's go a little back. All right. Let's define logistics. Let's try to explain what logistics is in general and how one load of so-called meat or whatever gets delivered from point A to point B. How many parties are involved in this transaction, and how many parties make money off of that transaction?
That is a great question.
So let's establish it from the beginning.
So let's deconstruct the transaction.
Yes, please,
right?
Please.
So you have a company that's in business. Let's say they manufacture meat. They're a meat processor.
Correct.
Right? Let's say they make hamburger meat. So then you have a company that produces hamburger meat, and then they sell to the marketplace. And then you have demand for those products. And so there's many companies that buy hamburger meat.
Correct.
Right? You can have restaurants, you could have food service companies that then resell the meat.
Correct.
You could have
there's all sorts of distribution centers, or
all sorts of distribution centers. But you have a shipper, and you have
a receiver.
You have a shipper and a receiver.
Yes.
And then in the mix in between, you have, so let's say you have a shipper, and they don't have a coast-to-coast trucking company. So let's say you have a shipper, and let's say the shipper is in New Jersey, let's say, and let's say the receiver's in California.
Right.
So you have two parties that are doing business, and each one of them does not possess a trucking company to move their freight, either the shipper to send it to the receiver or vice versa. So then they enter the logistics business. So
correct. That's where you, me come in place.
That's where we come into place.
But how?
And so step one in unraveling this is there's an agreement between the shipper and the receiver, and then amongst them, they decide who's going to handle transportation. So the shipper may sell the load delivered to the consignee. Mm-hmm. So then the shipper is going to arrange
freight on board.
Then the then the shipper is going to arrange the truck. Or conversely, the consignee may say, hey, FOB, we're going
to buy the product, but we're going to arrange our own transportation. They could say that as well, right?
Exactly. So if the consignee is going to arrange the transportation, they have options. They have trucking companies directly that they can hire, and they may or may not have relationships there, or they may hire a broker. So
how about commodity brokers?
Well,
who are they?
So commodity brokers are people that buy and sell specific commodities. So you may have a meat broker who is buying and selling and trading in meat, And then
he connects those parties. He connects the shipper and the receiver, whoever manufactures them and whoever is in need of that particular meat. And then he negotiates the rates in between them and all that, correct?
He does that. And then depending on how the broker works, he may work on a commission from one party or the other, or he may take title to the goods. He may buy and sell and trade it for his own account.
Oh, okay. So they can actually buy it and then resell it.
Right. And so then they're taking risk as well because they're taking title to goods.
Correct.
So you have a shipper, a consignee, you may have a commodity broker. Any one of the three of them is going to need to move this load of freight.
Correct.
So then one of those parties is going to hire either a trucking company directly if they have relationships with truckers, or they're going to hire a broker, and then they'll hire, let's say, in our case, a broker. Then the broker sources a truck to haul that freight for the customer, ideally through relationships that he already has. So the broker, generally brokers tend to work certain lanes and develop relationships with carriers in certain lanes. But it certainly comes to pass that a broker doesn't have a truck where he needs it when he needs it. So then he'll post the load on a load board and he'll make a new connection with a trucker, go through the onboarding process. And then if the carrier meets the broker's onboarding criteria,
yes,
broker hires the carrier, broker prays that the carrier will pick up and deliver the freight on time without problems. Carrier bills broker, broker bills his customer, broker pays carrier, customer pays broker, and that's a successful transaction.
So a lot of transactions, so everybody eats a little bit from that transaction, right? Somebody eats a little more, somebody eats a little less. That's how all the blames come. We guys as truckers blame you guys as brokers. You brokers blame us as truckers. Customers blame truckers for poor, quality of drivers, quality of equipment. Consignees blame them for arranging those kind of transportation. So everybody's blaming each other, but everybody keeps eating. I know that you guys, your particular company, does not post a lot of loads. You don't go on a load board and see your company out there. And just like you, there's tens of thousands of brokerage companies, I guess, that just, they have their lanes, they have their customers that you guys acquired for so long, and you guys never post them, or very rarely post them, right? I think over the years, you've established good relationships with companies, one of them, which is us, US Freight Lines. Thank you for that relationship. Thank you for your business. The same with us. We've established very good relationship with other brokerage companies that never post their freight on a load board. And with that being said, why do you guys do that? And this is a question that a lot of times come from a lot of people that, hey, why would you pay me, hypothetically speaking, $1,000, right, to move freight from A to B, when the load board, you can see same lane, give or take, for $800, but you will pay me that $1,000. Now, why is that? I probably understand is because you like our service, or whoever's service, HYZ Logistics service, right? And you want to pay them that amount of money just to be stress-free. But my question was, is it because of how difficult is it to acquire new customers? Because God forbid you paid less money to a company out of California that it's a one-man band. He opened 17 MC numbers in the last 17 years. You know that next year is going to be a different company. He's going to screw you for sure. You're going to lose your customers. And then how are you going to acquire new customers? Now, does it come because there's lack of freight, or because of there's lack of customers? I mean, how difficult is it to approach a customer? And how do you guys do that? The process of approaching a customer and keeping the customer happy.
That is a great question. We could probably spend our whole time
we can.
deconstructing that particular question. But to start out, I think, you nailed it. The only way to grow is to do business with people you're not currently doing business with, or to do more business with people you're already doing business with. So sometimes we do take chances and we do post freight when we need to, but on the brokerage side, there's a lot of risks. We take credit risk, we take claim risk, which we talked about. Potential loss of customer risk is a big deal because a lot of time and effort does go into acquiring new customers, and you could spend years building a good reputation and credibility, having a full bank account of credibility with a customer. You could spend years to acquire that, and 1 or 2 or 3 bad transactions in a brief period of time, and it's gone, and you could lose the customer.
I've been taught that, excuse me for interrupting, just 1 second. I've been taught that 15 years ago or 17 years ago by a very smart gentleman. He told me once this: you're as good as your last load is.
True.
Is it?
Well, I would only add to that by working diligently to increase your bank account of credibility with the people you do business with, I think, good folks beget business with good people, and so people are willing to grant grace. Customers know this is logistics. They know that there's things out of the hands of the broker, but how you respond when a situation happens is key. And although sometimes it does take 1 load and you're out, or a series of bad events in a brief period of time, the customer may say, hey, we like you, we like your service for many years, but now we don't trust your service. So it could happen that you can lose sometimes in a load, or sometimes in too many problems in too short of a period of time, you can lose a good customer. So the reality is, yes, you're only as good as your last load, because if the last load was a success and the next one wasn't, then you are in scramble mode to navigate the situation, to reduce if there's a claim or whatever, and it could be a service failure,
right?
But you're then in face-saving mode, and so and those are all the exceptions. So
how do you acquire new customers? So God forbid you lost the customer. Well, you need that revenue.
Well, you always have to be fishing for new customers.
How do you do that?
We cold call.
Okay. You still do that?
We still cold call. The best way to get new customers is referrals. So if you develop a good reputation and others refer you, that's a warm call. So that's we always appreciate referrals, as I know you do.
Right.
So it's referrals, it's cold calls. A major portion of our business is focused on refrigerated freight. So we target companies. In some cases, they're new customers that we've never done business with. We find them in many sources. It could be Zoom Info, it could be industrial shipper guides and the like. It could be we're out in the field knocking on doors in certain areas that we know that there's a lot of hitting up industrial parks, for example. So once we get a lead, it's usually a pretty long sales process to get, especially a big customer. But you never know when lightning's going to strike, because one of the things that I love about our industry, having come from the real estate industry and having been a real estate broker once upon a time, the sales cycle in commercial real estate is very slow. It could take years to get a client to finally trust you to help them service their needs. Our industry is very fast-paced. So a no, oftentimes a no is just a no today. So you got to be tenacious, and you have to be professional and persistent. And
how many times you heard no?
Countless times.
And how many times of those countless times, those no's came back as yes at a later time?
Well, many or I wouldn't be here, but a very small percentage, probably 1 or 2 percentage points. Another key that has paid dividends is, you never know where you're going to make your next friend. So keeping an open mind, like when truckers are working the load boards, or also when brokers are posting loads, there's always 2 ways to look at things. You can look at it very transactional. If I post a load, I need to cover the load today. And if I don't give it a thought, I post the load, I make the deal, and that's it, and everything worked out fine. Load picks up, it delivers, I'll never talk to the carrier again. Because remember, we're brokers. We need good customer relations, but we need steady carriers that we trust, that we know do a good job, that we know maintain their equipment, that we know if there's a claim are not going to stop answering the phone. So those are valuable to us.
Correct.
And so the other way to look at it is by being inquisitive and asking questions. I've had direct customers post loads, and I took the load, but asked a lot of questions, and then those turned into customers. Or the same thing with carriers. And so for your listeners, I know our business tends to be very transactional. I want the best load on that day, wherever I have a truck, and that's right. And that's, but if you get into a lane that you service regularly, be a little bit more inquisitive when you take a load from a broker, and hey, how often do you have this load? Or if you're the broker,
correct.
Hey, if I'm a broker and I'm struggling on a lane, so let's say New Jersey to California is a tough lane for me. Now, we know it's a pretty easy lane to cover because a lot of truckers are looking for freight like that. But the key is not to hire any trucker if I'm a broker. I want to build a relationship with somebody I trust. Because as a broker, I'm making, a bit of margin on any given load if all goes well. But
you used a very, very dangerous word now, margins. And I'm going to attack you on that.
Okay.
Because everybody is waiting on that. But before we do that, I want to conclude our conversation about customers. So we, as truck drivers, truck carriers, we have a load board or multiple load boards per se. We have the ability to go online. We open the load board, and then we start choosing whoever we want to work with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, there was a misconception that you guys as brokers have exactly the same. You have a load board of loads that are being posted by customers that you guys can grab and then resell it to us, to carriers or to truckers, however you might call us. Now, is this true or not? Do you guys have a load board in between freight brokers, or you don't?
Between brokers, we don't.
So you don't have a load board as we do?
We don't have a load board in the sense of what you're talking about. It varies by customers. So certain customers, you may have certain lanes that you handle for certain customers, but some of those customers themselves have a load board that they put loads out to all the brokers they do business with. So let's say, for example, you have the meat shipper, and the meat shipper has a core of a dozen brokers that they like to keep their business with. And let's say they get a new lane, or their regular broker does not have capacity when they need it. That customer may themselves have a load board that all the brokers can see. And so, although that's not somebody's specific lane, then the brokers might compete to get that load and hire a truck, whether it's hopefully a regular that they know, or
they have
or hire somebody or onboard a new carrier.
When you book a load with a customer, does the customer know who you are reselling or selling that load to? So for an example, you work for Julasco, for an example. And we do a lot of business with Julasco through you guys for years. Now, does Julasco know that U.S. Freight Lines is your preferred carrier on this particular lane?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
So we have a broker contract, and the customer trusts us to manage their freight.
All they care is that BLACKJACK handles that freight. Whoever BLACKJACK sells that load to, meaning not sell but hire that load, they don't really care, correct?
Mostly not, but some customers want transparency and they're hiring you, the broker, but they'll ask you at time of booking because that carrier is going to come and deliver the freight anyway. So like they want to know, hey, what's the name of the carrier that's going to be delivering? So it varies by customer.
Yeah, because we had situations where brokers want to see the name on the side of the truck. Now, I understand it's being done because of the double brokerage situation, and I know it's a huge, big problem in our industry. But I was thinking the customer asks too, or the broker tells the customer, hey, don't load anybody besides HYZ Logistics because this is the direct carrier that was hired for this particular lane. So I was thinking it's the customer that's requesting that.
Sometimes they do.
Sometimes.
Right? So if you have developed a relation, if you, the broker, have developed a relationship with a good carrier and the customer has noticed that XYZ carrier is coming in every week, they may start requesting XY carrier because they like that level of service. So they do pay attention and they do notice.
All right, that's very important for everybody to know that every load that you guys do, it's actually counting towards the level of overall doing a good job for the carrier, right? So every load that everybody is hauling is extremely important because it could ruin the relationship between the carrier and the broker and the customer. And it's extremely important. Before we go into the rates and all that, one more legal question that is extremely important for I know the answer to it, but I want everybody to hear it from your side. People that are driving or maybe our trucking companies. The moment I'm a truck driver, my name is Victor and I drive for US Freight Lines. I pick a load brokered by BLACKJACK Express. I go pick up, I go to shipper, I get loaded, I put my signature on the bill of lading, right? What does that signature mean? Because it's very important when people signs for those bill of lading. What is a bill of lading and what is signing for that bill of lading mean for us, for you, and for everybody else? What is that?
That is a great question. So bill of lading is basically a manifest of all of the goods, but it's also a contract of haul. So once the carrier picks up and the representative of that carrier signs his name on the bill of lading, what he's signing for is that contract of haul. He's signing for the goods that are going in his trailer, that what the bill of lading states is being loaded, that in fact, so he's responsible for count. So he's responsible for the amount of goods going in his trailer matching the contract of haul. If it's a temperature load, he's also signing, it's usually spelled out on the bill of lading, which is really the governing document of what temperature to maintain. So if it's a load of produce and it says 34 to 36 degrees, he needs to be maintaining 34 to 36 degrees. And the best way to do that is continuous running on the reefer unit. Go ahead.
Bill of lading, is it a federal document?
That is a great question. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I think the bill of lading is an agreement between the shipper and the consignee, though. But I will say that
so it's from the shipper and the consignee. The broker has nothing to do with the bill of lading.
Well, sometimes shippers will request a bill of lading from the broker. So what I will say is this: it's not a federal document, but federal law governs. We have a body of law in the United States called the Uniform Commercial Code, and that is the body of law, and that's been around for probably a century or close to a century or more, that governs transactions between business people. Okay, so but typically, so it's not, there's not a standard per se. Go ahead.
Who owns that load after the signature is on the piece of paper? That's the main question.
Once
So I loaded and I signed for it. Who owns that load in the period of hauling that load? So for example, it's a 3-day run. In those 3 days, who owns the freight?
It depends on the arrangement between the seller and the buyer. The trucking company, by virtue of picking up the load, does not take title to the goods, but they are responsible for the care of the goods that they pick up. So there is, again, in the bill of lading, it has certain terms in there. The truck driver is responsible for the care of the cargo that he picks up, but he doesn't take title.
But he doesn't
to the
take title of the product.
He doesn't take title of the product. He's responsible for its care. But if he doesn't care for that product in the proper manner, so it's not hauled at the proper temperature, let's say, or the equipment breaks down, or he's involved in an accident and the cargo gets destroyed, then he does, so he has a contingent liability if he doesn't properly take care of the load, or it could be the load could have been shipped short. Well, the driver, when he signs the bill of lading, he's signing for that load in good condition and for the amount of goods that he's picking up. So if at destination point all the goods are not there, he becomes responsible for the shortage. So
if he wasn't allowed inside the dock, then what happens? Then the shipper is liable? If they have a written policy, I'm assuming, right?
Well, in that case, then the shipper should be sealed. The driver should make sure that the load is sealed with a seal number notated on the bills of lading.
Good point.
And then when he gets to destination, the driver ought not to break the seal. It should be the consignee that breaks the seal. And the driver should be witnessing all of those events. As you pointed out, in your example, driver's not allowed on the dock. If the driver is allowed on the dock, he should be inspecting the freight as it's loaded and the count and making sure it's loaded properly and that all the freight's there. If he's not, driver wants to make sure if it's shipper load and count or driver's not allowed on the dock, he still needs to protect himself to make sure that the load is sealed, seal number notated on the bill,
right,
and that the consignee breaks the seal. That's
the seal is a great point. A lot of people just forget to put it on or don't want to put it on for some reasons, but they don't understand. Drivers don't understand that the seal put on the shipper actually protects them.
It's for their protection.
For their own protection. So they say, hey, you know what? It's been sealed at the shipper. Nobody could steal. The product wasn't stolen, wanted to say. So, and one more question regarding exactly the same thing. It actually happened to our carrier a few weeks back. We delivered a load of meat in, I believe, in Philadelphia. I don't know the origination of the load, but we got to the delivery into Philadelphia. The driver went to sleep literally by the facility, in front of the facility, and woke up. It's actually in the news. I'll share it with you. The driver felt the trailer moving in the middle of the night. He woke up, took a bath. He saw a lot of thieves over there, and then they opened the doors, and people took 4 pallets of meat or whatever the case might be. So of course it's an insurance claim. The insurance is gonna pay for it, no problem. Police report, even the news was there and everything. So everything is reported and documented. The biggest question is, and I have a lot of owner-operators watching this, a lot of carriers watching this, and drivers. Now I'll tell you what bad companies do, which I don't agree with. They don't pay their owner-operators for this, even though it's not their mistake that the freight was stolen, or they won't pay their drivers, blah, blah, stuff like that. Now, let's answer to everybody here. Does the carrier get paid for transportation, even though it was not their fault the freight was stolen? Or, per se, it could have get rolled over right before or you got involved in an accident, or whatever the case might be. Does the carrier get paid for transportation at the end?
Great question. So let's say, number one, if you have an insurance claim, as you do in this example,
Yes.
typically motor carriers have a cargo policy, and most cargo policies will have a provision for what's called earned freight.
Correct.
So in the workout of that claim, they may or may not get paid by the parties involved in the transaction, meaning shipper, consignee, through the broker. It may come to pass that the carrier will get paid his earned freight from the insurance company when they settle the claim. There is a standard, and it varies by insurance policy. It depends on how much of the freight, how much of the transportation was completed. So, for example, if the claim occurred in, let's say, Philadelphia, and the origination of the load was somewhere on the other side of the country, let's say California, then most of the transportation work was done.
Correct.
If, let's say, a claim like that occurred up in the city where the driver picked up the freight, there's a good chance that there'll be no freight paid. So the provision in the insurance is called earned freight.
Correct. So most of the time, not always, of course, there's, again, the insurances will find 1,000 ways to, or 1,000 excuses not to pay for the freight. But if you have a good insurance like we do, like most of the big companies have very, very good top A rated insurance companies, they will end up paying that. I want people to know that earned freight exists, and I want people to know to request that from their companies, because this is a legit term. This is a legit thing. It does exist, and it does happen.
Let me add to that. In the workout of a claim between shipper, consignee, broker, you're in the world of exception handling. So the norm, in well over 9 out of 10 times that we broker a load, everything picks up and delivers on time, and there's not a problem. Every time a claim comes up, every claim has a different personality and different set of circumstances, and every customer or every party, how they handle it. In fact, and every insurance adjuster has a different way that they like to handle freight. So let's say the consignee, they may want to handle the freight exclusive of, they may want to handle the claim exclusive of freight. So let's say the consignee, in my example here, is paying the freight bill. They may want to just get settled for the cost of the goods and not deal with the freight. So the point is that every claim that we touch has a personality of its own, but a major component of it always involves the freight. We always consider, when we deconstruct a claim and who's responsible for what, freight is important. It gets addressed one way or another, but who addresses it and whether it's insurance or not, it's all variable.
Understood. Thank you very much. Let's get back to the word that you used. And I know for a fact I wanted to talk about it. Everybody watching our channel wants to hear that. Extremely important and interesting topic. That would be the word that you used, margins. And with margins, we'll use the word profits, profitability. I'm going to ask you, if you don't want to disclose, it's totally fine. But I'm going to ask you this. What is an industry normal average for a brokerage firm per load, or on a load, or profitability for the whole overall company?
That's a great question. So first of all, there are freight brokers in our industry that are publicly traded companies. So
Right.
what I would encourage you, if you haven't already, or some of your listeners, AI is our friend, and we can get a lot of things answered, but there are publicly traded brokerage companies, and it's very easy to see what their gross margins are. But typically, small, privately owned brokerages, and nobody likes to, we have a lot of friendly competitors, but everybody holds the whole conversation of margin pretty tight to the vest. But I think it's no secret that brokers work on approximately 10% of gross profit of the spread between what they bill and what they pay the carriers. At least that's what we're endeavoring to do, or brokers are endeavoring to do. Now, 10% may seem like a lot, but there's a lot of expenses that come out of the gross margin that a broker charges.
The key word is gross.
Right. So that's gross profit, just like a motor carrier has gross profit.
Exactly. Which is a lot.
Right.
Which is a lot.
But then by the time you pare it down, it's not a lot left over, because there's a lot of expense. In the case of a brokerage, it's a service business, which in the case of a trucking company, you have a service component to it. You know, you have trucks and fuel and insurance and drivers, and then you have back office staff, maintenance. So the margins are very, very thin. It's really same for brokerage too. Number one expense is people. You got to pay, good people to treat them right, to have good people that are going to treat your customers properly. You need to take good care of them. And there's just so many admin expenses associated with running a brokerage company. Technology is a big one these days too, because we live in the technological age.
Yes.
And so everybody has to have, TMS, all sorts of other types of ancillary technologies, visibility, driver tracking and tracing and visibility, backroom automation, automation for payments, and so on. So at the end of the day, what may seem like a lot, you're struggling to save, you're struggling to, the profit margins are pretty low.
Is it safe to say that the net profit margins are within the 2-3%?
Well,
area?
I'd argue it's less.
It's less?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. If gross profit margins are
10%
are
per se.
a dime,
Yes.
we're struggling to make a penny or two on a dime.
So it's 1 to 2%.
1 to 2%.
Okay. That's for the whole industry, or that's just for your own company?
Well, I just think it's I don't know if that's true for the whole industry, because I have a pretty small sample size, but I know that we're experiencing a tremendous amount of margin squeeze, just like the carriers are, and we're struggling. We're not making a penny on a dime these days.
95% of my listeners here, or our listeners here, they are sure, and they're 100% positive that you guys are making a lot of money nowadays, or specifically in the last 3 years that the Great Freight Recession lasted. Perhaps it still lasts, as you said last time when we had breakfast. I think it's over, but nonetheless. And in the matter of those 3 years, everybody, 95% of people that listen to us think that you guys are the biggest challenge and the biggest problem of everything that happened, right? And precisely to say, it's the price gouging. People saw some extremely highly profitable loads. I know in a reefer world that doesn't happen, but in a step deck, flatbed world, sometimes it happens when the shipper gives the driver a bill of lading with the freight amount. I mean, how much he paid the broker, and usually it's nothing even close to 10%. Could be 50%. I've heard 100%, just because of the supply and demand situation. And everybody, they saw a picture like that. It circulates around through the media and Facebook and Instagram, whatnot. And then everybody's like, oh, there we go. That's who we blame for, right? Now help me understand. Is this true? That's number one. Number two is, explain please to everybody that when we're talking gross margins, we're not talking per load. We're talking per quarter or per year, because I'm sure you have loads where you make a lot more than 10%, and I'm sure we can both agree on that. And you have loads where you actually are in negative. So please, are you guys the reason of all these bankruptcies? It's a yes or no question. Are you guys the reason for all these bankruptcies and for the freight recession that happened in America?
In a word, no.
Okay.
We don't haul the kind of freight that you're talking about. I've never seen, 100% margins on loads.
That's precisely, I've seen TQL.
Yeah, I don't know TQL is one of our big competitors. I don't know what they do. I've never seen, we don't get to see their margins. But in the kind of freight that we haul, in the refrigerated space, in the produce space, nobody is making those kind of margins. But let's back out a minute. We brokers don't do anything the truckers themselves can't do. So for all the truckers that hate the brokers, don't use brokers. Go market yourself to customers directly and engage customers and get them to hire you, and you can sidestep the brokers. The problem is that if you're a small trucking company, you only run so many lanes, and so it's hard to get direct customers in all the areas that you may run. So my recommendation is endeavor to get some direct accounts on your own. And then you have nobody to complain about except yourself, because what we do, we're a broker, we're easily replaceable. If we don't add value to a transaction, then we don't do business with us. Do business with people that you feel add value. So there's good operators and there's bad operators in every industry. There are good brokers. We are your friend. The major push down on rates, so we live in the Great Recession, which we've argued about whether or not that's still on. But what caused it was all of the inflation that came on from the pandemic. 2021 was boom time in logistics. Many people rushed into the industry, and so what that created was overcapacity. 21 ended, all the government stimulus ended, and we crashed back to reality, and now there's too much capacity. And so now all this capacity is flushing out of the system. But we live in a world today where there's a lot of transparency.
We have a lot of data, yeah.
We have a lot of data. Correct. Now, have brokers ever, and do brokers pick off when they can? They do. But on the other hand, like you pointed out, and I'll dig into that in a second, do brokers lose money on lanes? They do. That's part of the risk that we take. We talked about some of the risks that brokers take. But one of the risks that we take is pricing risk, because many customers that brokers do business with want to do business, used to be on year-round freight. Now year-round freight doesn't really exist anymore because the rates in the last 5 years have been way too volatile. Brokers can't survive on year-round rates. It's just too big of a period to commit to. There's too much volatility. So now some customers are spot market customers. And so we're negotiating a rate on every load we touch, or for a week or a month or whatever. So that's really spot market business. But there's a lot of accounts that we're negotiating seasonal rates or quarterly rates. And so to the customer, they want a commitment for a period of time. But in most cases, we're dealing with carriers on a spot market. So I think there's a big inefficiency in the way we're doing business with a customer to quote or to commit to rates for a period of time, but it's generally not that way with carriers. Carriers are for hire in the open market on any given day, and so it's always spot market rate to the carrier. And oftentimes you guess wrong, and that is a risk that we take as brokers, is pricing risk. But because we live in a world of so much data, the Wall Street Journal quotes data that's put out by DAT. We all have access to DAT.
Correct.
I don't know how many tens or hundreds of billions of dollars of annual freight spend they now track, but we can all subscribe. to rate view.
Yes.
And so
Yeah, we follow all that. Yeah.
there's no secret in the rates,
Correct.
but it includes the shippers too. So the squeeze is always by the shippers. Everybody is squeezing everybody, but it's not a fact that it's fat times for brokers and we can charge what we want and we're squeezing the trucks.
I keep telling everybody that if it would be the fat, as you call it, fat times for brokers, why do we keep on reading all those brokers going out of business lately? You know, and in the last 3 years, I haven't seen as many brokers going out of business as I saw in the last 3 years. Never. And I'm in business for 17, 18 years now, right? I've never seen as many brokers going out of business. If that would be that easy and everybody would make so much money, then why do they go out of business, right? I'm assuming you guys have a lot of competition. Now, we saw, and please correct me if I'm wrong, we saw a lot of people and their dogs getting into the trucking business, right? Everybody, you name it, all the professions, everybody all of a sudden decided to give up on their careers, get CDLs. And to get CDLs, it was extremely easy, 3, 4, 5, 7 days. I've read comments that in 5 days you will just get a CDL and have a good day, right? And then sit in the truck. So tell me if I'm wrong. I believe that a lot of people got into freight brokers as well. I don't have that sort of data. I have data from a trucking side of things. And I did see an extremely increased number of MC numbers, of trucks, drivers, CDL holders, and all that. I've seen increasing a lot. And by a lot, I mean a lot. Hundreds of thousands, I'm talking. Now, our freight industry is not able to sustain that, amount of trucks. Now, in the freight brokerage world, did you guys have an increase of freight brokers as well, just as we did?
That's a great question. I don't have any statistics that I can report on.
Okay.
We're doing our thing, yet I do pay attention to what's going on in the industry, but I don't recall hearing in 21 about many entrants of brokers. I mean, some of the broker bankruptcies that we've heard about have been like startup brokers that were looking to scale. So they were, some of them were running at losses, trying to buy market share.
Yes.
And then ultimately, that is not a long-term sustainable business model.
Like Uber did. And now Uber Freight is struggling and they're looking to sell it. Nobody wants to buy Uber Freight because it lost money for so many years just by acquiring the market share.
Yeah, and the most recent broker that went bankrupt just last month was a company in California that was a broker in technology, Zoom Transportation. I don't know if you heard of them.
Yes.
ZUUM. But they went out of business. But that was a company.
Convoy.
Yeah, Convoy.
Yeah, a lot of big companies are going out of business, but it's mainly because of their growth strategy.
Right. So they came on big, and it was sink or swim for them, and they couldn't get over the hump. But small business owners like us, the trick is to build a business that's built to last, and you do that by building a good reputation, by caring about building and maintaining a good name.
Right.
Because that's how we make deposit.
I'm sure in your world, maintaining a good name is extremely difficult. And I think in the long run, it pays off.
In the long run, it pays off, but it's boring. But it's a strategy that's been around a long time, and there's many bumps and bruises along the way. Just like in a sports team, you have you have good years where you might make the playoffs and you may win a championship, and then you've got many lean years. Well, business is that way too. There's lots of, we do business in a market. We're a broker. We don't outperform the market. We float with the market. And that means that we have to live through good times and bad. But I think the trick is to build a good name when times are good that helps you get through when times are bad. And hopefully the cycles turn around,
What I've noticed, and I had this conversation with a few of my friends, and we've noticed lately by saying that, I mean last week it started. A lot of brokers started blocking carriers and including them in a DNU and do not use lists if they have non-domicile drivers. Have you heard about that?
I've heard about, so I'm not real well read, except that I watch the news like you do, and I know there's a big crackdown on non-domiciled drivers, but your question is, have I heard of brokers blocking carriers for that reason? I haven't. That doesn't mean it's not happening, because if you have heard it's happening, it's happening.
It started happening last week. Some people, some good friend of mine called me and told me about it. And then at the beginning, I just didn't believe in it, or I was very skeptical about it. Then I started digging into it more and more, called a few people. In fact, it is true and it is happening. And everybody has exactly the same question. How the hell does a broker know if a carrier has non-domicile drivers, or had, or will have, and how does that happen? You guys have access somehow to our driver's license lists through Highway, or is there something that we don't know about? And if you don't say, I'm fine, I'm okay.
That's a great question. The answer is I don't know. I know that us brokers, and like we talked about that earlier when we talked about cargo claims.
Yeah,
there's a lot of information that we don't get to see. But when we hire a motor carrier, we only know your drivers by who comes on our freight. Now, through Highway, one of the things that Highway was built to combat fraud. And fraud, we didn't get into that, but that's a whole topic. We could have spent the whole time to talk about fraud. But Highway was built to try to eliminate fraud. What we've seen them tracking is VIN numbers of equipment.
Correct.
So they're tracking VIN numbers of equipment, and they'll flag a carrier because they'll say that equipment was reused. The truth is that owner-operators can move from company to company, so it's within the realm of possibility that equipment could be leased onto different companies. So that in and of itself is a flag. To my knowledge, they're not tracking drivers, and there's no database that we get to see of drivers.
That's exactly what I said. I mean, how can they see that? I mean, what level of access Highway actually has? I mean, I know Highway is integrated with all our logbooks and whatnot, right? And they have access to our drivers, but does it have the ability to actually show that, or to open the information openly to brokers and let them? I don't understand how that happens, but it does happen. And with that being said, what's your position on the latest things with non-domicile drivers, and what's most importantly, the English proficiency, because that is an extremely important topic as well.
Right. Yeah. So whether it's Highway or it's RMIS, everybody is repackaging and adding value to publicly known information. So they're taking information in the public domain and they're adding value to it. In the case of Highway, what they've added is public compliance information. What they've added to that is behavioral information by the carriers, by tracking IP addresses, telephone numbers, email addresses, and all that. So that's their secret sauce, is how they're really trying to help their subscribers combat fraud. But CDL information, and by the way, ELD information that Highway's tracking, that's only with the permission. When somebody onboards through Highway,
That's correct. We give them the permission.
You give permission, correct. So that's, but drivers, no. As far as non-domiciled CDLs and English proficiency, so I just want to share some things. I want to share something, and I'll give you my thought on the matter.
Please do, yes.
So English proficiency dates back to really the founding of what became the motor carrier safety regulations. So in 1936, as part of the newly formed motor carrier safety regulations, the Interstate Commerce Commission, the ICC, established an English language requirement for drivers of motor vehicles operated on interstate or foreign commerce by common and contract carriers. So the point is that the English proficiency requirement for truck drivers dates back to 1936.
90 years back.
90 years ago, which predates the modern highway system as we know it, which was built out in the 50s under the Eisenhower administration.
Correct.
But to be even a little bit more specific, so the rule was that on and after July 1st of 1937, no motor carrier shall drive or require or permit any person to drive any motor vehicle operated in interstate or foreign commerce unless the person so driving possesses the following minimum qualifications: ability to read and speak the English language, unless the person was engaged in so driving on July 1st of 37. So what that means is that the English proficiency regulation came into existence in 1937. They did give a 2-year pass for those drivers that did not meet the requirement until 1939. 1939, so on May 27th of 1939, the ICC made certain changes and additions to the motor carrier safety regulations, including the elimination of that exception that we just talked about, granted by the original rules for those drivers unable to read and speak English. Okay.
So 1939 is actually when it went into effect.
1939 is when the current...
May 27 of 1939.
1939. So it says, the intent of the commission to require such ability of all drivers in this service has been unmistakable since 1937, and the intervening period of more than 2 years is regarded as sufficient to justify the removal of the exception. And then, starting in 1939, the rule is Section 391.11 B2 of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations. It currently states that a person is qualified to drive a commercial motor vehicle if he or she can read and speak the English language sufficiently to converse with the general public, to understand highway traffic signs and signals in English language, and to respond to official inquiries and make entries on reports and records. So the current rule and regulation to speak English
always existed.
So everybody today, anybody who was driving a truck in 1939 is no longer with us.
Right.
So everybody that's driving today is bound by these regulations from 1939. So really, I think the issue has been lack of enforcement, right? So
I think the Obama administration actually allowed for that law not to be strictly enforced.
Right, that could be, but it's been, so when I came into the industry in 1994, and I was processing driver qualification files, and I remember like that was a checkbox on the form back then, and that was 30 years ago. I mean, that was 1994. I mean, we were a small fleet, and at that time, all those drivers, spoke English, and it was a non-issue. But I remember over the years hearing various things like, Wyoming is going to crack down on English speaking. That over the years has come up a few times. But
correct. I remember that even when I was driving, a lot of people were afraid to drive through Wyoming because at the port of entry, they would see that you have a terrible accent or don't speak English at all, and they would put you out of service. And I actually, I have seen that personally 17 years ago, or whenever the case might be. I saw that personally with my own eyes, people getting out of service for not speaking English. So this is nothing new. It's just the fact that they banned the enforcement of it, and then now current administration wants to open the enforcement again, and then people is very, very mad about it, which, hey, it is what it is. But I strongly believe in the fact that if you live and work in this country, you have to speak not professionally, at 100%, but at least a little bit, right? To be able to converse, as it says in the document, to converse with the general public and to, if God forbid something happens, at least explain the DOT officer or the police officer, the insurance, or at the broker or your dispatchers, whoever that might be, or the customer, what happened, what led to it. And I'm sure because of the English, there's a lot of claims. And I'm sure you've heard of them, or maybe you've had them. Because of the English, there's a lot of claims going on. Either the freight wasn't handled correctly, or the signs were misread, or anything, could happen. And I think it's only logical that English has to be back in place, the English proficiency.
Victor, you read my mind. I mean, I don't want to repeat everything you said, but I concur with what you said. Wyoming, and I recall in the years growing up, the same experiences that you had. From the broker standpoint, driver got shut down at the port of entry.
Mm-hmm.
So what was Wyoming actually doing? They were enforcing a law from 1939 that nobody else was enforcing.
Mm-hmm.
And then regarding the merit of speaking a language, if you're an immigrant to any country and you make a decision to go to any country, for your own personal and professional development, it makes total sense to learn the language for your own well-being, for your own ability to face the public, for your own ability to excel in your own profession, to be able to communicate. It's just so important. In terms of claims, yes, it's the FMCSA rules and regulations are specifically tilted towards public safety. This is all about public safety, being able to communicate with officials, the police, being able, of course, to read road signs. And what's really pushed this into the consciousness today is there's been some catastrophic accidents recently. The one in Florida, that driver, from what I read, could not understand, did not have English proficiency, and couldn't read the roadsides. And on the Florida Turnpike, made a U-turn in a spot where, that was clearly not allowed.
Correct.
And he basically turned his tractor trailer in front of a vehicle that was coming down and crashed in. That was the facts of that case. But
we could probably be completely honest about it and argue with that fact that, and I'll give you some numbers here. There's 3.6 million CDL holders in America, all right, off of which 3 million people are U.S. citizen. 300,000, they say, are green card holders, and then another 300,000 are non-domicile drivers, right? I'll tell you this, statistically speaking, 3 million people being U.S. citizens, they, in fact, make a lot more accidents than the 300,000 non-domicile people or the ones that don't speak English. So we can argue with the fact that they only used one big accident as an excuse to actually implement new laws or to at least enforce the old ones. Because America became so liberal, everybody's even afraid to enforce their own laws. And that's a problem. That's a problem that America came up to. I'm in this country for whatever, an X amount of years. I don't even remember now, a lot. But it's no longer the America that I came into. And I'm sure it's not the America that you grew up in, right? Totally different. It became a very liberal, very democratic. Everybody is afraid of talking, of speaking, and everybody is afraid of even enforcing their own laws that backdate to 1939. So they had to use some sort of excuse for that. I'm telling you, 3 million people actually make a lot more accidents than 300,000 non-domiciles. But they had to use something in order to start fighting against people that previous administration let in.
Well, immigration has been a flashpoint issue in our country. It was a big deal in the last presidential election.
Right.
And you know, the pendulum always swings one way or the other on politics and public policy.
Correct.
Right? And I think the issue here is the speed of change. It's like breakneck speed. So I think in our personal lives, it's always a good idea, and I think this is true in terms of public policy, to measure twice and cut once. Because so often we do the opposite.
Right.
We cut first and measure later. So I think what's unsettling is the breakneck pace of these changes, you know.
This has to start with the head of the snake. It has to start with the states. It has to start with the serial schools, right? With the corruption that you mentioned earlier. When we were talking not on cameras, there's a lot of corruption between the serial schools and the states and all that. It's just as many serials we're giving to people that, you know, they spend 3 days. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the rule now says that you have to 180 hours of learning or something like that in serial school.
You know better than me.
I might be wrong. Correct. I might be wrong. But I've heard that even if you spend 7 days in a row, 24-hour a day learning, you still don't have enough time to get the CDL. And even though people somehow magically get their CDLs in 5 days, 3 days, or 7 days, that's just not normal. That's just not how it's supposed to be. And especially in states like California, I mean, come on. People have CDLs that they don't even know how to spell hello. You know what I mean? So I think that's not normal, and I think that's one way to fight supply and demand. Unfortunately, I'll tell you this. Unfortunately, a lot of good people fall under one big category of immigrants. You know, we all have a label on our forehead. Hey, you're an immigrant. It means that you are a risk. No, I know personally a lot of people that are great people, great drivers, much better drivers than half of the U.S. citizens. But unfortunately, they fall under that label. It is what it is.
Yeah.
That is unfortunate. That I don't agree with. But I do agree with there's a lot of bad apples came to this country. I'm not going to name the names of the countries, even though I could. There's a lot of people that in those countries, they never ever saw a car, not to say truck. And they come to America and they get their license in 7 days. They put behind the wheel and start driving. He doesn't even know what a road is or a car. And he gets put behind the wheel of a 18-wheeler, of a semi-truck. That's purely bullshit.
Well,
I'm sorry.
It's negligence.
Yes,
it's really negligence. And we did talk off camera, but the truck driving schools and the Secretary of States have really been, implementing public policy decisions of some of those states as it pertains to immigrants. Right here in Illinois, there was a scandal many years ago, commercial driver's licenses for money.
Oh, there you go.
So
corruption.
It's corruption. So corruption is it's a cancer in the public domain, and we all suffer for it. And when the pendulum swings at the breakneck speed that it is, to your point, many good people, and I don't know what the percentage is, it's probably a small percentage of bad actors. Yes. But the good ones get thrown out with the bad ones.
Unfortunately, yes. But it is what it is.
And I think in our industry, it's just worth pointing out that there's many disruptors in many industries, and that's on everybody's mind today. And that's, very well could be a big disruptor in our industry in the short term.
Mr. Joe, I'm going to ask you one question. Did you like our podcast today? This is going to be on video, so be careful what you say. Did you like our podcast today? I know it's your first one, so please tell me your feedback, honest feedback.
Feedback's good. I appreciate the invitation. It's my first time ever doing a podcast.
Right.
I really enjoyed our conversation.
we have some other topics that we did not cover that I would love to cover with you.
Okay.
Now I'm gonna ask you in front of the cameras now, so you can't say anything wrong. If I'm gonna invite you again to speak about something else or to get more in depth about some numbers of the brokerage or of the trucking companies or the future, which is very important, the future of logistics and the trucking in general, would you accept my invitation again if I would extend one?
Yes, I'll come back again. I'll look forward to it.
Thank you very much. It's been an hour and a lot, so I know you're an extremely busy guy. I know you have business to do. Besides brokerage, you own a factoring company.
Yeah.
We haven't touched anything about that. I would be interested in listening and hearing anything you have to say about that business as well, and I'm sure everybody here would love the same.
Okay.
So next time, if you wouldn't mind, I would ask some questions about factoring company. How do you guys choose carriers? How do you guys make money off of factoring? And where is the factoring business going? I want next time for us to talk about old school trucking versus today's trucking. That's a very important topic, an interesting topic to say at least. How was it back in the days? How is it today? What differences do you see? I mean, it's 30 years in business. It's a long, long time. I would love you to talk about a little bit of competition in the freight world. I would like you to tell us a little more about how customers pay and how long. So there's a lot of other topics that I would love to discuss next time, and I would really appreciate it if you would come. Once again, thank you very much. I'm going to end this discussion in Russian, even though it's not my first language, but I'm still going to end it up. So, thank you very much, Joe. Thank you. Ребята, еще раз спасибо вам большое за то, что досмотрели до конца. Тем, кто досмотрели до конца, я понимаю, это тяжело, это долго. Надеюсь, вам разговор сегодня понравился. Надеюсь, вы чему-то научились сегодня. Я, допустим, сам что-то новое выучил, что-то... Пожалуйста, комментируйте, пожалуйста, оставьте комментарии, какие бы вы вопросы хотели, чтобы я им задавал в следующий раз, когда они будут у нас на подкасте. Потому что, насколько я вижу, человек очень открыто с нами разговаривает, очень открыто, он готов поделиться информацией. Поэтому, пожалуйста, ребята, комментируйте, обязательно ставьте лайки, подписываемся и до скорых встреч. Спасибо.